introduce documents pertaining to Sustainable Development Technology Canada and on the sub-amendment of Mr. Kelly.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I must admit that I am totally shocked, flabbergasted that I have to rise in the House of Commons to announce this government's deficit. Normally, they would be the ones announcing their own deficit in their economic statement. But they tabled the fall economic statement without speaking to it. There's no finance minister who will dare to even talk about this fall economic statement. There's a new finance minister who's running off to the Governor General's residence instead of doing his work. We have had 3 different finance ministers today alone. Today, the finance minister and deputy prime minister resigned. Then, through the order of precedent, it went to the Minister of Industry. He became Minister of Finance based on the system that Cabinet uses for precedence. Then he immediately announced that he was resigning because he did not want to take ownership of the financial situation, which he had just found out about. Then the 3rd finance minister today was the public safety minister, who was responsible for keeping our borders safe, who has been threatened by the United States and tariffs. And then the public safety minister switched positions and became the finance minister. And then he disappeared. Where is he? You know what, Mr. Speaker? What's worse about all this is the gargantuan deficit. We were promised a $40 billion deficit. Those were to be the guardrails for the deficit. And what's the deficit? It is $61.9 billion, Mr. Speaker. That's 55% higher than what was promised to us 8 months ago. It's out of control. Mr. Speaker, the finance minister, or should I say former finance minister, noticed, and I give her credit for this, a few months ago she noticed that this government's deficits were dangerous, that they were leading to higher inflation, slowing down interest rate decreases, harming our social programs, and slowing our economic growth. That's why the finance minister said that there would be a hard line, fiscal guardrails, preventing the deficit from going beyond $40 billion. What are guardrails? They prevent buses from driving off the road and tumbling into ravines. Although the Prime Minister has taken control of the wheel in the bus, he's veered off to the left, past the guardrail, and now he's in the ravine. We've all fallen into the ravine, and this is a threat to the future of Canada and Canadians, Mr. Speaker. That's why we are against this. We will vote against this plan. We insist that New Democrats do their jobs for once and vote non-confidence in this out-of-control government. This government is out of control, corrupt, and costly, and we demand that elections be called. Here's the truth, Mr. Speaker. Let me share with you a truly shocking fact. My grandfather came to Canada from Ireland. Do you know why? Because there was poverty in Ireland. Now, Ireland is 2 times richer than Canada. The GDP per capita in Ireland is $100,000. Ours, what is it? $50,000. The Irish, they don't have natural resources like ours. They don't have any oil. They don't have the massive advantage of living next to the United States, the biggest economy in the world. They with that situation are now 2 times wealthier than us because they've made the right decisions. Some say that there are 2 types of people in this world, Mr. Speaker, those who are Irish and those who want to be Irish. They have made good economic decisions, Mr. Speaker. They've cut taxes, they've cut red tape to speed up big projects. They have opened up their economy to free rein for entrepreneurs and for business, fewer state businesses. Half of government costs. So they spend half as much as us on their government, and they have double the wealth for their people. We know what we need to do, Mr. Speaker. We need to cut the red tape, the bureaucracy, consultants, all kinds of corporate nonsense, waste. We need to bring down deficits, taxes. We need to cut the red tape, cut the admin, and allow more open-mindedness, new solutions. Then we will be able to deliver bigger paychecks, powerful paychecks that people will bring home to then be able to reinvest in their communities. So we would have lower inflation and our dollar would keep its value. That's what we would do to fight the threats made by President-elect Trump. We will bring investment home. We will build. We will become the freest economy in the world. We will have the wealthiest citizens of any country in the world. Those are our goals, Mr. Speaker. Enough. It's enough already with the chaos, the poverty, the homelessness. This socialist NDP Liberal government is imposing heavy poverty on people. We need to bring it back to common sense. We need to get back to basics, to give back to Canada what it deserves. The promise that any Canadian who works hard can, in fact, live good lives with good paychecks, with good pensions. Canadians need to be able to afford food and safe, good homes in safe communities. That's common sense, and that's what we will do to put Canada first and foremost.
Mr. Speaker,
Canada, great again.
I rise today flabbergasted by the news that has just been made public. The government has finally revealed its true deficit number. Remember, this finance minister, this outgoing and now former finance minister, told the world that she was putting in place guardrails to limit the damage that her deficits could do. Her deficit plan was $40 billion, a mind-bogglingly large number that was already contributing to rekindling inflation again. This $40 billion was too big. It was out of control as it was. But at least to her credit, she said no more than that. And she decided she would have a guardrail. We know a guardrail is meant to stop vehicles from flying off cliffs. Well, as she was trying throughout the year to avoid going off the cliff, there were 2 people on the bus who had other ideas. The Prime Minister and carbon tax Carney. And the 2 of them went to the front of the bus, they grabbed the wheel, they pulled it sharply to the left, smashing into that guardrail, and she tried to resist. So they pulled even further to the left, and they stepped on the gas. The bus flew off the cliff, and now Canadians are at the bottom of the ravine in a big pile of debt. But instead of taking responsibility, the Prime Minister told her that she should take all the blame. That when the ambulances and the police cruisers arrived and the fire department, that she take the blame for running the bus off the cliff, and that carbon tax Carney and the Prime Minister could innocently sit back, and that the Prime Minister could then put carbon tax Carney in charge of driving the next bus. The good old boys in the back room would protect themselves and make the finance minister, the then finance minister, take all the blame. Reminds you of the way they treated the former Attorney General, a brilliant and brave First Nations woman who refused to kowtow to corruption. It reminds us of the way they treated Jane Philpott and so many other brave women who have dared question this self-described feminist prime minister. Some feminist indeed, throwing the bus off the cliff and throwing women under the bus. That is his real record. That his real record on finance, Mr. Speaker, is yet another $62 billion deficit. For context, outside of this government, there is no government in the history of Canada that has ever run a $62 billion deficit. Not even in the 90s when the Wall Street Journal said that we were a third world basket case. Not even during the massive global economic crisis did the deficit come anywhere close to that. And here we are, with the global economy growing, with the American economy booming in stable times. This deficit is 100% at the feet of this irresponsible prime minister and his personal economic advisor, Carbon Tax Carney.
That's right.
Now, Carney says he doesn't even want the job of finance minister. He doesn't even want to try and drive the crashed out bus after he helped run it off the cliff. And they couldn't find anyone all day. In fact, no one will appear today even to defend this incredible disaster of a budget. Look at the consequences in human terms, Mr. Speaker. We have 1,400 homeless camps in Ontario, 35 homeless encampments in Halifax alone. We have 2 million people lined up at food banks. Scurvy is making a comeback. The government admits that 1 in 4 children are going to school hungry every single day. Unemployment is rising and, according to this budget, expected to exceed 7% by the end of next calendar year. The gap between per capita GDP in Canada and the US is now 30,000 in Canadian dollars, 30,000 it was equal 10 years ago. This is the worst gap since at least the Second World War, and some say the worst gap in a century. Canadian workers are only getting 55 cents of investment for every dollar an American worker gets. $500 billion Canadian investment dollars, which works out to almost a quarter of our economy, has left net to go to the United States, where it builds pipelines, factories, warehouses, pipelines, business centers, Canadian investment dollars paying American wages, while our workers go starving for investment and for salaries to pay their bills. When I travel across this country, I consistently meet 2 types of people. One, those who are a little better off and tell me that, and I'll be very blunt about this, that if I don't win, they will leave the country. And they are very numerous.
Yes.
But you know, I don't worry about them as much. You know who I worry about? The ones who can't leave. The ones who don't know, and if I can just use very blunt language, who tell me, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. I have no idea how I'm going to pay my way.
That's right.
I met a waitress at a restaurant not long ago, and she came up to me and she grabbed me by the hand and she said, "You have to win." And I said, "Oh, thank you, I appreciate your support." She said, No, it wasn't a compliment. You have to win. And then she told me her story. She told me that she was working 1 full-time job and 2 part-time jobs just to pay her bills as a single woman in her late 50s. And she was tired of working all the time. So she cut everything out of her budget, every creature comfort, everything she enjoyed about her life, she cut it out so that she could drop one of those part-time jobs. And then one morning, she woke up and she walked outside and her car was gone. And she called her insurance and they said they weren't going to cover the replacement value. So she had to take that job back because she simply cannot live her life without a car. Now you can bet your bottom dollar the guy who stole the car, he was probably out on bail. This was not his first job.
That's right.
Her taxes have gone up. Her heating bill has gone up. Her wages have not gone up. She's scared to go out in the streets in places where they didn't even lock the door not long ago. These are the people we're fighting for. These silly games over here, they're very entertaining. The soap opera that everyone's seized with today, that's all fine. But there are real people whose lives are on the line here, and we have a duty to work for them. And quite frankly, this woman doesn't see me as any, or any of us as any kind of savior. They see us all as a last hope. In fact, she doesn't want to be saved. She just wants her life back. She was taking care of herself just fine before her tax, her heat, her grocery bill went through the roof and her car went missing. She was doing just fine. She was doing everything right. Met another guy at the La Brat Brewery a few days ago, and you can watch the video of me talking with him. He walked up to me, he said, I have 3 jobs and I can't make it. We're renting, we have no hope, we've given up on ever owning a home. We're renting, we can barely make it. And he said to me, I feel ashamed when I talk to my kids because they ask me why I'm never around and why we can never have a house. And I feel like a failure. But he didn't fail. He has been failed.
That's right.
He has been robbed of the promise of Canada. It was a very simple promise that if you worked hard, you got a good life. Now, it wasn't fancy or extravagant, but you got a house with a yard where you could have kids playing safely, and you could have a nice dog that you could afford to feed along with the kids, and your kids could play safely in the streets. That was the promise. Now, politicians break promises all the time. But you know what was bad about this promise? This promise didn't belong to this Prime Minister. It wasn't his promise to break. It belonged to all of us. And our purpose is to bring home that promise for that young man, that young father, and that older female worker so that they can once again take back control of their lives, live in a safe country where their hard work earns them a good wage, where the rent and their food is affordable, and where when they go to bed at night, they know that they will be safe throughout their sleep and that they will have their car in their driveway in the morning. A country where people are proud again to fly the flag, where they know the government is a servant and not a master, where they understand that every day the Commons, this place, works for the common people, not for the ego of one man desperate to cling on to his job. We must remember that we are servants in this place. We have a job to do on behalf of the people who sent us here. Our personal dramas are not important. The dramas that should seize all of our concern and imagination are the daily dramas of the working women and men that build this country. We are in it for them. We're going to give them back control of their lives in the freest country on earth, Canada. Let's bring it home.